Have you ever walked into a room, and within seconds, you just knew something felt off? No one was arguing, nobody looked upset, everything seemed completely normal.
But somehow, you could feel the tension, a forced smile, a strange silence, someone avoiding eye contact for just a split second.
And while everyone else kept talking like nothing was happening, your brain had already started putting the pieces together. If that sounds familiar, you might think you're just an overthinker.
Or maybe you've been told, you read too much into everything. But what if that's not the real story? What if your brain isn't making things up? What if it's simply noticing things that most people never see?
Here's the surprising truth. Some people don't just experience the world, they absorb it. Every facial expression, every shift in someone's tone, every awkward pause, every tiny change in someone's energy. And while this kind of awareness might sound like a superpower, psychology suggests it's often something very different. It can become a prison. Because when your mind never stops observing, it never truly rests. You don't just leave a conversation behind, you replay it. You analyze every sentence, every reaction, every silence, wondering what people really meant. And over time, that constant awareness slowly drains your emotional energy.
So in this video, we're going to uncover the psychology behind people who are overly aware, why they notice things others completely miss, why they struggle to switch their brain off,
And most importantly, how they can stop being controlled by their own mind without losing what makes them unique.
Because once you understand what's really happening inside your brain, you'll stop asking, "What's wrong with me?" and start asking, "How can I use this differently?"
But before we talk about the signs, we need to answer one important question.
Why do some people become overly aware in the first place? Because this doesn't happen by accident.
Psychologists generally believe there are two different paths that lead here. The first one, you're born with it.
Some people naturally have a nervous system that's far more sensitive than average. Researchers call this sensory processing sensitivity.
You may have also heard the term highly sensitive person, or HSP. These people don't simply notice more, they process more.
Imagine two cameras. One records in standard definition, the other records in ultra-high resolution. Both are looking at the exact same scene, but one captures details the other completely misses.
That's what daily life feels like for someone with a highly sensitive nervous system.
A loud restaurant feels louder. A stressful room feels heavier. A person's sadness feels deeper. Their brain naturally absorbs more information, not because they're trying to, but because that's how they're wired. For them, the world has always been louder, brighter, and emotionally richer. But not everyone becomes overly aware because of biology. For many people, awareness wasn't a gift, it was survival.
And this is where things become much more interesting. Imagine a child growing up in a house where nothing ever felt predictable.
Some days everyone laughed. Other days, a tiny mistake could turn into an argument. Maybe a parent came home in different moods every night. Maybe love felt conditional.
Maybe peace could disappear without warning. A child in that environment quickly learns something. Pay attention or get hurt.
So without realizing it, their brain starts collecting data. The sound of footsteps, the way a door closes,
The tone of someone's voice, the expression on someone's face before they even speak. What looks like ordinary behavior to everyone else becomes valuable survival information.
Neuroscientists call this hypervigilance. Your brain stays on high alert because somewhere deep inside,
it learned that danger doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it whispers.
The part of your brain responsible for detecting threats, called the amygdala, becomes incredibly active.
Its job is simple. Keep scanning, keep predicting, keep protecting. And over years, that survival strategy becomes automatic. Even after the danger is gone, the brain keeps doing the same job.
it's like living in a house that used to catch fire every week. Even after moving somewhere safe, You still wake up every night checking for smoke.
Not because you're irrational, because your brain remembers. That's why so many overly aware adults blame themselves. They think, why can't I stop overthinking? Why am I always analyzing everything? But maybe you're not broken. Maybe your brain became incredibly intelligent at keeping you safe.
The problem is, the skills that protected you as a child can quietly imprison you as an adult.
And that's exactly where the first sign begins. Living in constant analysis mode. This is probably the biggest reason overly aware people feel mentally exhausted. Because while everyone else is simply living, their brain is investigating.
Imagine your manager sends you a message. Can we talk later? That's it. That's it. Just 5 words.
For most people, it's just another meeting. But for someone who's overly aware, those 5 words become a mystery. Why did they say later? Why didn't they explain? Did I make a mistake? Did they sound colder than usual? Did something happen? Within seconds, their brain creates 10 different possibilities, none of which may actually be true.
And this doesn't only happen at work. It happens everywhere. Someone replies with a shorter text than usual. A friend pauses before answering.
Someone smiles, but it feels slightly forced. Their brain instantly begins connecting invisible dots, not because they want to, because it happens automatically. Psychologists believe part of this comes from a brain network called the default mode network. This network becomes active whenever we're reflecting, remembering, or thinking about ourselves. In overly aware people, it's often much harder to quiet down. So while one part of them is having a conversation, another part is quietly watching everything, analyzing expressions, comparing tone of voice, trying to predict what happens next. Imagine trying to enjoy a movie while someone constantly pauses it every 30 seconds to discuss every scene. Eventually, you stop enjoying the movie. That's what everyday life feels like for many overly aware people.
By the end of the day, they haven't run a marathon, they haven't climbed a mountain, they've simply been thinking. Yet somehow, they're completely exhausted, because their brain never stopped working.
But here's the problem. Eventually, that constant analysis stops focusing only on other people. It turns inward.
And that's where the second sign begins. Hyper self-awareness.
Most people experience emotions. They feel happy, they feel anxious, they feel disappointed. And eventually, those emotions pass. But overly aware people rarely allow that to happen. Instead, they immediately begin analyzing the emotion itself. Imagine waking up one morning feeling strangely sad. Instead of simply accepting the feeling, their brain asks, why am I sad? Did something happen yesterday? Shouldn't I be grateful? What's wrong with me? Then another thought appears. Maybe I'm being dramatic. I shouldn't feel this way. Within minutes, they're no longer just experiencing sadness. They're judging themselves for feeling sad. Psychology calls this metacognition, thinking about your own thinking. Normally, this ability helps us reflect and grow, but when it never switches off, it becomes exhausting.
Even happiness isn't safe from analysis. You're laughing with friends. Everything feels great.
Then suddenly, a thought appears. Did I laugh too loudly? Did that joke make me sound weird? Did everyone think I was trying too hard?
The moment gets interrupted, not by another person, by your own mind.
It's like trying to dance while constantly looking in the mirror to make sure every movement is perfect. You might avoid mistakes, but you also lose the joy of dancing.
And when you spend enough time analyzing yourself, something else quietly changes. The way you see other people.
And that's where the third sign begins. Losing innocence in relationships.
One of the hardest parts about being overly aware is that you slowly stop taking people at face value. You begin noticing motives behind behavior.
Someone compliments your work. Instead of simply smiling, a question immediately appears.
Do they actually mean that? Or do they want something from me? Someone suddenly becomes extra friendly.
Most people enjoy it, but your brain quietly wonders, why now? What changed? What's the catch?
Psychologists call this advanced theory of mind, the ability to imagine what someone else might be thinking or feeling. It's an incredibly useful skill, but when it becomes too active, you begin seeing hidden meanings everywhere. A simple apology feels incomplete. A compliment feels suspicious. Kindness feels conditional. You start wondering whether people are being genuine or simply being polite. And over time, trust becomes harder, not because you've become cynical, but because you've become too good at seeing possibilities. You recognize that people sometimes hide their true feelings.
Sometimes they say yes when they mean no. Sometimes they smile while feeling hurt. Sometimes confidence hides insecurity.
And once you've seen those hidden layers, it's difficult to go back. The painful part is, you don't become someone who hates people. You become someone who's always cautious, always questioning, always looking beneath the surface, which means even when you're surrounded by people, part of you still feels alone. Because while everyone else seems relaxed, your brain is still trying to figure out what's really happening. And this is where awareness becomes even heavier. Because eventually,
you stop reading people's behavior
and start feeling their emotions. And that's where everything changes. The fourth sign: you don't just understand other people's emotions, you absorb them. Most people can tell when someone is having a bad day. They notice it, they sympathize, then they move on.
But for someone who's overly aware, it doesn't stop there. They feel it, almost as if that emotion has quietly become their own. Have you ever walked into a room where nobody said a single word, yet somehow you immediately felt the tension? Maybe two coworkers had just argued. Maybe a couple sitting across the room had been fighting.
Nobody explained anything. Nobody had to. You could feel it.
That's because your brain isn't only listening to words, it's reading body language, facial expressions, silence, energy.
Tiny emotional signals that most people never consciously notice. Psychologists often describe this as a combination of cognitive empathy, understanding what someone else is feeling, and emotional empathy, actually experiencing a piece of that feeling yourself. Your brain becomes like an emotional sponge.
Someone sitting next to you is anxious. And 10 minutes later, you notice your own heart beating faster. A friend tells you about losing someone they love.
And hours after the conversation ends, their sadness is still sitting in your chest. It's almost impossible to separate what belongs to them from what now belongs to me. People love talking to you because they feel understood. They tell you things they've never told anyone else. They say, "I don't know why, but I just feel comfortable around you." And while that sounds beautiful, it comes with a hidden cost. You slowly become everyone's emotional safe place, while forgetting that you also need one. You become the person who calms arguments, the one who notices when someone feels left out, the one who always checks if everyone else is okay. But very few people ever stop to ask, "How are you doing?" Because you've become so good at carrying everyone else's emotions
that people forget you're carrying your own too. And when those emotions have nowhere to go, they don't simply disappear. They move somewhere else, into your body. Which brings us to the fifth sign.
Your body starts reacting, even when nothing dangerous is happening. Most people think anxiety starts in the mind, but often it starts with the body.
Imagine drinking a cup of coffee. Your heart beats a little faster. For most people, that's normal. They barely notice it. But an overly aware brain notices immediately. Your heart speeds up. Your brain detects the change.
And suddenly, a question appears. Why is my heart racing? Am I anxious? What if I'm about to have a panic attack? Now your body becomes even more alert. Stress hormones begin rising. Your breathing changes. Your muscles tighten.
Your heartbeat increases even more.
And now, your brain looks at those new sensations and says, "See? Something really is wrong." Without realizing it, you've entered a psychological loop. A normal body sensation gets interpreted as danger.
That interpretation creates fear. Fear creates stronger physical sensations, which then creates even more fear. Psychologists call this cycle interoception. Your brain is constantly monitoring what's happening inside your body. Normally, this system keeps us healthy. It lets us know when we're hungry, thirsty, or tired. But in overly aware people, the volume gets turned all the way up. Every heartbeat feels important. Every headache feels suspicious. Every tiny sensation demands attention. And living like that is exhausting. Because your own body starts feeling like a constant stream of warning signs. The cruel part is, most of those warnings aren't predicting danger. They're simply normal human experiences. But when your nervous system has spent years expecting something bad to happen, normal no longer feels normal. Safe doesn't feel safe. Calm feels unfamiliar.
Which leads to one of the deepest psychological patterns of all, the sixth sign. Trying to control life by predicting everything. Think about this for a second. Why do people analyze every possible outcome?
Why do they replay conversations? Why do they imagine worst-case scenarios over and over again? Most people think it's because they're pessimistic. But that's rarely the real reason.
The real reason is protection. Somewhere deep inside, their brain has developed one simple belief.
If I can predict pain, maybe I can avoid it. So without even noticing, their mind starts running simulations. What if they stop liking me? What if I fail? What if everything falls apart? What if I miss something important?
What if tomorrow changes everything? One possibility becomes 5. 5 becomes 50, and before they realize it, they're living inside futures that don't even exist. Psychologists call this analysis paralysis.
The brain becomes so focused on finding the perfect decision that it never actually makes one.
Imagine standing at a crossroads. Instead of choosing a direction, you spend hours calculating every possible route.
Every possible obstacle. Every possible mistake. Eventually, the sun goes down, and you never leave the starting point. That's exactly what happens inside an overly aware mind. It mistakes certainty for safety. It believes if it thinks long enough, it can remove uncertainty from life. But life has never worked that way. No amount of analysis can guarantee that nobody will leave, that nothing will change, or that you'll never get hurt. The future has always been uncertain. The only difference is, most people eventually accept that. An overly aware mind keeps fighting it, and that's where the biggest sacrifice happens. Without realizing it, you slowly stop living your life and start managing it.
Every decision becomes a risk assessment. Every relationship becomes an investigation.
Every opportunity becomes something to calculate instead of experience. You protect yourself from disappointment. You protect yourself from disappointment, but you also protect yourself from joy. Because both require vulnerability, both require uncertainty, and both require letting go of control. The hardest truth isn't that overly aware people think too much. It's that they spend so much time preparing for life that they sometimes forget to actually live it. But here's the good news. Awareness itself isn't the problem. In fact, it's one of your greatest strengths. The real problem is not knowing where your responsibility ends and where life begins. And once you understand that difference, everything starts to change. Because the goal was never to become less aware. The goal is to finally feel free.
So, what can an overly aware person actually do? Can you train your brain to stop noticing everything? Can you switch off years of constant observation and finally experience peace? The honest answer is no.
And strangely enough,
That's actually good news, because your awareness isn't the enemy. It's one of the most remarkable parts of who you are. The real problem isn't that you notice too much. It's that you've been carrying everything you notice. There's a huge difference. Imagine walking through a museum. You can admire every painting without trying to take every single one home.
But emotionally, that's exactly what overly aware people often do. They don't just notice tension, they carry it.
They don't just recognize sadness, they absorb it. They don't just observe someone's insecurity, they quietly make it their responsibility.
And after years of doing that, life starts feeling unbelievably heavy. Not because the world became heavier, but because you've been carrying things that were never yours to hold.
This is why many therapists don't try to make highly aware people less sensitive. Instead, they teach them boundaries.
Not walls, boundaries. Because those two things are completely different. Walls keep everyone out. Boundaries simply help you recognize what belongs to you
And what doesn't? The first boundary is this.
Not every silence has a hidden meaning. Think about how many times you've sent someone a message and they didn't reply for hours.
What happened inside your mind? They're upset. I must have said something wrong. They're ignoring me. But then they finally respond. And they simply say, "Sorry, I've been busy all day." Nothing was wrong. Your brain just filled in the blanks.
And that's what highly aware minds naturally do. They don't just observe what happened, they instinctively try to explain it. They hate uncertainty. So they create stories. The next time someone replies late, pause.
Instead of asking, "What does this mean?" ask yourself, "What facts do I actually have?"
Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're working. Maybe they forgot. Maybe it has absolutely nothing to do with you. Learning to separate facts from assumptions might be one of the most freeing skills you'll ever develop.
The second boundary. Not every emotion needs to be solved. This one is incredibly difficult.
Especially if you've spent your whole life trying to understand yourself. Imagine your heart suddenly starts beating faster. Your old pattern immediately says something's wrong, but your new pattern says something different. My heart is beating faster. That's it. No judgment, no investigation, just observation.
Notice the difference. One sentence creates panic. The other creates awareness. Psychologists sometimes describe this as moving from reaction to observation. Instead of wrestling every emotion,
You simply allow it to exist. Like watching clouds move across the sky. You don't chase them, you don't stop them, you simply let them pass.
because emotions were never designed to stay forever. The more you fight them, the longer they usually remain. The third boundary might be the hardest of all. Not every truth requires action.
Highly aware people often notice things that others completely miss. They notice insecurity, distance, hidden sadness, unspoken frustration.
And because they care deeply, they immediately feel responsible for fixing it. But here's something life eventually teaches all of us.
Understanding someone doesn't mean you're responsible for healing them. You can recognize someone's pain without carrying it. You can love someone without rescuing them. You can understand someone's struggle without sacrificing your own peace.
That realization changes everything. The figure still notices everything. It just doesn't carry everything.
Because awareness without boundaries becomes self-destruction. But awareness with boundaries becomes wisdom. And that's the transformation. You don't become less observant. You become lighter.
You still notice the atmosphere when you enter a room, but it no longer controls your mood.
You still recognize when someone is pretending to be okay. but you no longer feel responsible for fixing every broken piece.
You still see deeply into human nature, but instead of judging,
You become curious. Instead of preparing for the worst, you become present. And presence is something overly aware people often spend their entire lives searching for.
because for the first time, their mind isn't trying to predict tomorrow. It isn't replaying yesterday.
It's finally experiencing today.
Maybe that's what real emotional freedom looks like. Not becoming someone different, but learning to live peacefully with the person you've always been. The truth is, the world doesn't need fewer people who think deeply. It needs people who think deeply, without losing themselves. It needs people who can understand others, while still protecting their own peace.
And if you've watched this far, there's a good chance you've recognized yourself somewhere in this video. Maybe you constantly analyze conversations. Maybe you absorb other people's emotions. Maybe you absorb other people's emotions. Maybe you've spent years believing something was wrong with you, when in reality, your mind was simply trying to protect you. If that's you, I want you to remember one thing. You are not broken. You are not weak. And you are definitely not too much.
You simply learned to survive in a way that your nervous system never forgot. Now, you get to teach it something new.
That not every silence is a threat. Not every emotion is your responsibility.
And not every burden belongs on your shoulders. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who carry everything.
They're the ones who finally learn what to put down.
If this video helped you understand yourself a little better, leave a comment and tell me which sign described you the most.
Your story might help someone else realize they're not alone.
And if you enjoy videos that explore the hidden psychology behind human behavior, subscribe to oyepsyfocus.
Because every week, we break down the patterns your mind follows, so you can stop feeling controlled by them.
And finally start understanding yourself. Until next time, take care of your mind, because it's been taking care of you for a very long time.